What if Harry's return to Britain comes with a royal condition he never expected? And what if King Charles has quietly decided that coming home does not mean getting everything Harry wants? Because according to the explosive theory surrounding Lady Colin Campbell's latest claims, the real battle is no longer about whether Harry and Meghan can return to Britain. That decision is already moving. The real battle is what Charles will allow them to have once they are back on British soil, and one alleged condition could change the entire game.
Lady Colin Campbell, what on earth is going on? Just weeks after you revealed to the world this close, shall we say, friendship that Prince Harry had developed with a certain young lady in Montecito, they claim to be packing their bags.
This whole situation is very interesting because once Meghan and those children are back in the United Kingdom, that means that the marital home is in the United Kingdom. That means that Harry is in a far stronger position in terms of any future place where, in the event of a permanent separation or divorce.
That opening tells you everything about the atmosphere surrounding this return. Vans, schools, arrangements, plans. This does not sound like somebody casually visiting for a weekend. It sounds like a family preparing to establish a presence again. But that is exactly where the controversy begins. Because if Harry believes that returning to Britain automatically opens the palace door, the latest gossip suggests he may be about to discover that Charles has drawn a line that cannot simply be crossed because his son has changed his mind.
They really hate each other now, and they cannot hide it anymore.
She was the villain.
How was she dangerous?
Because of the need for her to rehabilitate her image.
Harry was not in love with Meghan Markle.
He was madly in love. The veil is now lifting.
And here is where Lady C's alleged warning becomes explosive. The theory is that Charles could be willing to welcome Harry privately as his son while refusing to restore the old royal privileges that Harry once walked away from. In other words, Harry can come home, he can see his father, he can spend time with family, and he can rebuild whatever personal relationship remains, but the moment the conversation turns toward official status. Taxpayer-funded protection, royal appearances, or anything resembling a return to working royal life, Charles allegedly wants one thing settled first: no demands.
He took Meghan and the kids, they came over privately to see the king a few weeks ago. When she said, "I'll never set foot in this country again," and when she said the royal family is racist, and when she slagged off almost every bit of the institution, why does she still want her daughter and son to be a prince and princess then? Part of a racist institution.
No conditions from Harry. No expectation that the palace simply bends because the Sussexes have decided Britain is suddenly useful again. And that is a very different homecoming. Because remember the extraordinary contradiction surrounding this entire story. For years, Harry and Meghan's public narrative was that Britain was dangerous, hostile, and unsuitable for their children. Their life in America was presented as the safer, freer alternative. Yet now, suddenly, Britain is back on the table. Homes are being discussed. Schools are being arranged. Family connections are being mentioned. And the very institution that was once portrayed as the source of their misery is suddenly becoming central to their future. That is why the alleged condition matters. Because if Charles really has decided that Harry's return must remain strictly personal unless Harry accepts a set of palace boundaries, then the old fantasy of simply walking back into royal life collapses immediately. And there is another detail that makes this even more interesting. The original discussion around Harry's return repeatedly circles back to security. Harry has spent years fighting over his protection arrangements, while critics have argued that returning to Britain could dramatically change the practical circumstances surrounding that dispute. But security and royal status are not necessarily the same thing. One does not automatically equal the other. That distinction could become the biggest trap of all. Harry could return physically without returning institutionally. And if Charles is allegedly telling him, in effect, you are welcome as my son, but royal privileges are another conversation, then suddenly the entire calculation changes. That clip captures the suspicion perfectly. The question is no longer simply whether Harry would accept a smaller role. The question is what Harry would accept in exchange for coming back, because a minor royal role, even a symbolic one, could create enormous headlines. It could revive speculation about official duties, security, access, and palace influence, and that is precisely why William's position becomes so important. Imagine this scene. Harry arrives back in Britain expecting reconciliation. Charles wants peace. Harry wants a relationship with his father, but William has spent years building the future monarchy while keeping his distance from the Sussex drama. If Charles offers Harry even a small opening without William's agreement, the family tension could explode all over again. That is the alleged royal dilemma hiding underneath the homecoming. Charles may want his son back. William may want boundaries, Harry may want opportunity, and Meghan may want relevance. Those four interests do not naturally fit together. Then comes the money question, and this is where the gossip becomes even more uncomfortable. Critics have repeatedly pointed toward the enormous cost of maintaining private security, the uncertainty surrounding commercial projects, and the difficulty of creating another major global business empire from the same royal story that has already been mined for years. The Sussex brand has always depended heavily on attention. But attention is not the same thing as stability. And if Britain becomes the new stage, every appearance suddenly becomes valuable. Every photograph becomes content. Every meeting becomes a headline. Every royal interaction becomes another chapter. That is why the alleged Charles condition could be brutally simple. Come back as family first and forget the assumption that the palace owes you a platform, because that would force Harry into the one position he has spent years avoiding asking rather than demanding. And if Lady C's broader theory is that the Sussexes are returning because circumstances have changed dramatically, then the condition becomes even more significant. The person walking through the palace gates may technically be Prince Harry, but the negotiating power may no longer belong to him. 6 years ago, Harry and Meghan controlled the narrative because they could leave. Now they are coming back. And coming back is very different from being invited back on your own terms. That is the twist nobody should ignore, because the biggest question may not be whether King Charles wants Harry home. The real pressure point comes when the return stops being about emotion and starts becoming about rules. If King Charles is prepared to see Harry as a son, that does not automatically mean the institution is prepared to see him as a working royal again. And that distinction could become the one thing neither side can escape. Harry can walk back into Britain, but walking back into the machinery of the monarchy is another matter entirely. That is why the alleged final condition carries so much weight. Before anything resembling an official role is discussed, Harry would have to accept that the old arrangement is finished. There would be no automatic restoration, no instant royal platform, and no assumption that returning home means returning to the privileges that once came with being a senior member of the family. And this is where Lady Colin Campbell's alleged position becomes particularly explosive, because the entire Sussex return has been surrounded by questions about motivation. Is this genuinely about family? Is it about the children? Is it about rebuilding a connection with Britain? Or is there something much more practical underneath it? The timing has already encouraged speculation, especially because the return comes after years of commercial turbulence, public disputes, and increasingly complicated relationships with the royal institution. If Harry now needs something from the palace, then the balance of power is completely different from the balance that existed when he walked away. The most uncomfortable possibility for Harry would be discovering that King Charles is willing to open the family door while keeping the institutional door firmly closed. That would allow father and son to meet privately without creating a new royal role, and it would prevent every family conversation from instantly becoming a negotiation over titles, duties, security, or public money. For King Charles, that could be the safest compromise. For Harry, however, it could feel like returning to Britain without actually getting back what he once had. And then there is William. This is where everything becomes even more delicate. Any suggestion that Harry could suddenly receive a meaningful royal role would inevitably raise questions about the future king. William has spent years preparing for a monarchy built around a smaller working group, and bringing Harry back into that structure would not simply be a family decision. It would affect the institution itself. That is why the alleged condition could be less about punishment and more about control. King Charles may want Harry close enough to rebuild a relationship, but not close enough to destabilize the monarchy or reopen every conflict that followed the Sussex departure. Meghan creates another layer of uncertainty. If Harry receives a limited opening while Meghan remains outside official royal life, then the couple would no longer be operating as a single package within the institution. That That possibility alone could generate enormous controversy. Harry might attend selected events, maintain a private relationship with his father, and occasionally appear around family occasions, while Meghan remains primarily focused on her own projects. Such an arrangement would look nothing like the half-in, half-out model that became so controversial in the first place, and that may be the entire point. The palace does not need to slam the door in Harry's face. It simply needs to make the rules impossible to misunderstand. Come home if you want. Rebuild your family relationships if you can. Let the children know their cousins. Spend time with King Charles. But do not confuse personal reconciliation with institutional restoration. That would turn the alleged final condition into something far more powerful than a simple demand. It would be a test of whether Harry genuinely wants his family back or whether he wants the machinery surrounding that family back as well. Because the moment Harry accepts those boundaries, the story changes completely. The return stops looking like a triumphant comeback and starts looking like a negotiated homecoming on terms largely set by the palace. And if Lady Colin Campbell's warning is even remotely close to the truth, that may be the twist nobody saw coming. Harry can return to Britain, but he may have to leave the old expectations behind. The palace door could open, the family door could open, and yet the royal door could remain firmly shut.